And after 3 shorts, we finally have lines. And it's not for nothing. In the short so far, it's difficult to see any need for the characters to speak, as it's going to be with the others aside from one. Presence makes good use of language already on the title. The screen shows the title in katakana, purezensu, in red with parts in white. So, of course, I tried to find other readings taking those parts away, unsuccessfully. However, there's also this little line. Why doesn't it follow the whole word? It could be just a separation, but I found something else. Zensu is an adjective for complete, whose kanji contains the idea of completeness and number, strength, destiny, or laws. This adjective is also used meaning diploid, as for a life form that works with pairs of chromosomes, like humans. Puree, no potatoes, can be read as pre, so this katakana title can be read as pre-complete or pre-deployed, which is going to make more sense after analyzing the short. We start with a scene of people passing by on the street when... Okay... I have to assume this scene is meant to define that people here are not necessarily people. Maybe there are people here and they are indistinguishable from robots, or maybe they are all robots.
Well, now an android.
The android seems to be a middle-aged man and smokes, so no habit could exclude people from being androids. The very protagonist is only suggested as being human by a line he has,
ロボットにグルメなんていないだろう。ロボットに人格があるか
for reproducing and aging, his face being taken over by haunted curtain eyebrows, which kinda makes sense. He declares himself a feminist, but the term is used in the same way that herbivore has been used to describe men. The idea, quite backwards even for 1987, is that men are naturally dominating, that is, carnivores, and that men who don't behave that way, called herbivores, end up having little success and not fulfilling their obligations, be these biological, sociological, or etc. Basically, he has a little one-room house in the woods where he makes toys in secret, especially as Cyber Cindy Lauper, which he associates with imagining himself married to a more feminine woman. So far so good, but then she goes and ruins it, questioning her purpose and saying she wants to date him, which scares him and... seeing his android falling apart and having to go back to his little house to make sure she is still there. And then Elderly being seen by his wife, who only now has a face by the way, with his android to then disappear, the last toy to be in his hand starting to fly. I'm going to ignore what he would be doing in an isolated room with Cyber Cindy. Starting now. Because the shorts issue is really interesting. On one hand, it makes good use of background, making something timeless even if integrated to the existence of androids. The spectator can easily get that their presence is completely integrated and doesn't create conflicts. At least no external conflict. The house in the wood as a key part of the scenario, it's an ingenious idea. It's a great representation of romantic philosophy which values older traditions, life on the field and intense emotion. This obviously contributes a lot to the tone. At the same time, the house can be seen as a parallel to Hansel and Gretel's house in the woods, where he could do what he wanted, even if that's making toys instead of eating sweets, and there's a woman he fears. The story can be seen as a man who didn't grow up completely and has childish habits, Cyber Cindy even suggesting as much. Insert otaku jokes here. Until facing his fear and eventually accepting it as a part of himself. Another interpretation is that it's about spirituality. That machine created by the protagonist's desires, the one we know is a machine, would have come back for having a real spirit, in a life in which he was surrounded by death, read robots' parts everywhere, creating a quite silly notion that it all ends up well in the afterlife. On the other hand, these readings require ignoring basic points. If the idea is that robot had a spirit, the main character is a murderer, even if an accidental one, and doesn't have a moment of redemption. That, of course, besides implying his whole life was useless, with the possible exception of being a father and a grandfather. If the idea is that Cyber Cindy is a part of himself he denies, maybe its destruction has to do with his inner conflict. But why would she come back if she destroys herself in his mind? If she doesn't, again, that implies his life was unhappy or even a lie, despite him seeming content. Unfortunately, the short loses a lot for being misogynistic. On top of the wife only having a face when she worries about her husband, the second part of that maybe being accidental, but her not having a face in the beginning leaving very little question in my opinion. The main character being passive while creating toys and suddenly destroying the one that is more than a moving statue is quite problematic. First, because it implies the silly notion that accepting a partner with a career implies having little success, being unhappy, or assuming women as superior to men. Exactly the reason why I don't call myself a feminist anymore. And second, this also implies this man, with his miserable little pile of secrets, is a cowardly imbecile. If the implication is that he is unhappy without someone more feminine, he could have a romance with the robot. If the implication is that he has some instinct of domination, he could mistreat the robot instead of the wife and go into a different philosophical issue. If the implication is that he requires a woman's attention, the android would have been giving him exactly what he wanted. So I have to assume the implication here would be that he wants such things but is afraid of the consequences, and when confronted with the possibility of having what he wants, he despairs, continuing to want such things and only getting them in his afterlife, possibly in the form of 72 androids. Still, I have to admit, I liked the use of scenery and the scenes in the cabin. The symbolism was interesting to me. The walls are full of supernatural characters, besides a sock puppet who looks like he wants to hit that, a Christmas tree, a demon, and a flying saucer, which, by the way, is the only thing to leave the room. So this could be seen as a representation of people's hearts, only the technology affecting the outside world, mythology and desires continuing internal. In fact, he lets a toy fall when she confesses her love and leans on him, a figure with exaggerated eyes that move in a silly way, like a cartoon character when they see someone attractive, besides a suggestively located screw. The toy demon knocks it down when he destroys the android. The demon could represent human cruelty itself, relating to the questions the main character asks the robot, but I'd say it represents his fear of something new, since his fear seems to be what led him to attack her. End of the day, the short seems to suggest, one way or another, that the protagonist is incomplete for not having a feminine woman, and that's why the idea of pre-deployed can make sense. Even if you want to give the benefit of the doubt and say the wife might have been ignoring him, why would he be incomplete later on? Why would the woman who's worried about him, who sees him disappear, would not complete him? Unfortunately, it's a well done short from a bad idea. And after 3 shorts, we finally have lines. Still, I have to admit, I like the use of scenery and the cabin scenes. Still, I have to admit, I like the use of scenery and the cabin scenes. Scenes in the cabin, maybe. Still, I have to... Unfortunately...